Maintenance job, very popular, asked for feature request. So very much us reacting to studios here. It's the idea of a job that's designed to only run once on every single slave in the farm. So once that particular task completes on a particular slave, then it's no longer going to pick up again. So there's no repetition there. Where is this useful? Well, the maintenance job type is actually a job object mode type. So we have normal, we've now got the maintenance job object, and there is actually a third one, which is tile. So we've introduced it at quite a high level in terms of our architecture, and that's quite useful because we'll be able to do more things with that in the future. But it could be useful for performing benchmark tests. It could be for installing software. It's not a replacement for enterprise level software deployment. We're not as we're not building a tool here for that. But if you're a very small studio, then this could be very handy to execute a script once on every single machine. That could be handy because it's actually a job that gets picked up by the slaves. If you're trying to remotely execute a script and that machine is busy 100% CPU processing, it may not be able to effectively run that script, and that might not be a good time to do it. But if you effectively put a job into the queue, which those slaves then process that script, execute that script, or perhaps synchronize some files, then you do know that that machine is not going to be busy doing any deadline other job processing because it's doing a maintenance job at this time, of which then you can give it priority and pull and waiting, etc., to perhaps make the job scheduled to only run late at night or in the early hours of the morning. So useful for performing benchmark tests. Let's have a little look here. We could have a job that's in the queue, which perhaps it could be a max file, a MAR file, SIMAFOLD. It could be a Modo benchmark scene, which you know processes in a reasonable period of time on your machine. But what would be really good to know is how long does that job, that particular 3D scene file, for example, take to process on all the other machines, which could be of different ages and hence different hardware specifications. So what we really want to do is submit this job and get it to process once on every single machine. So that's where this maintenance job mode comes in. Best way to show this is just if you look at the resubmission of a job, it comes up nicely in the dialog here. It's not the only place it's available. It effectively is a couple of extra key equals value ini file entries that you make in the job info file whenever you submit a job. So this isn't something that can only be done once the job is submitted. It can be done literally when a job is ready and is actually submitted to deadline. But this is just visually a good way to actually show how it works. So we're going to resubmit it as a maintenance job, and we can actually get it so that each slave actually processes perhaps it more than once. So perhaps it had 0 to an end frame range. So it actually represses something more than once. In this case, we don't need to do that. We just leave it in at 0 because we just want this job to process once on each machine in the render farm. So it's going to warn me that I'm going to overwrite. So that's okay. I know. Yeah, success. Cool. So you can see here it's queued. The job here is white. And it's got 59. Well, the reason it's got 59 is because you can see in my slave panel there's 59 machines. So yeah, that's actually worked. So each of these entries will process on a machine in the farm, and we're only processed once. Then you'll have obviously in the statistics, you'll have a finish time, a render time. So with the render time, we know on a particular, say you know your machines, the hardware specification, we know how long it took to process on a particular machine. We can do a bit of pen and paper work and actually take some averages there, or we can just pull the stats and put them into Excel, because all our stats you can just copy and paste and stick them into Excel. And then we can actually come back in and we can go into the modify the slave properties of a particular spec machine. And the interesting one probably is the render time multiplier as opposed to the task, because task, it changes because it might take a long time for the data to actually be distributed and copied, the data files to process, so it's not really a good representation sometimes, but it is of the overall. So we could multiply the render time multiplier, every slave has got one. Well, if we knew this machine takes 2.5 times longer to process, then we'll put in 2.5. And we can click OK to that, and then that means that we know that that particular machine takes 2.5 times longer to render something. Why is that important? Well, just to digress for a second to finish off on this piece, but if you go into configure repository options and you go into the job settings, the automatic job timeout is a godsend. Why? Well, because it looks at effectively hanging tasks, hanging frames. And we can say that perhaps once all tasks for a particular job are 80% complete, for example, we can enforce that the automatic timeout is calculated, and it looks at the frames previous and the frames after that may have been processed by other machines, and it makes a call about whether or not that task looks like it's probably taking too long, it's hanging and should be requeued. Well, the key thing to really making the automatic job timeout work as well as possible is knowing the spec of your machines, and the way you identify that is with the normalized job timeout multiplier, which I showed, which you can apply to each slave in your farm, and the maintenance job will allow you to calculate that.